The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, a closer look at the shadowy program that spends billions of Chicago taxpayer dollars with little oversight. We'll pull back the curtain on TIF, or Tax Increment Financing, its impact on your wallet, your neighborhood, and the city.
In an unexpected move, Bill Daley closes the door on his bid for governor. Is Pat Quinn the luckiest man in Illinois politics?
Plus, teens get a jump start on the job market, how one innovative program helps students prep for the future. These stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Tonight, a closer look at what amounts to a pot of gold for Chicago area developers, courtesy of the taxpayers.
Officially, they're called TIFs, short for Tax Increment Financing.
And before you change the channel, consider this. Billions of tax dollars are being spent on all kinds of projects with very little oversight.
Tonight, we take a look at how they work, the economic benefit they generate, and the impact TIF districts have on the lives of ordinary citizens.
This development, just to give some sort of perspective, is going to be more than twice the size, 2.5 times the size of the Loop.
A slick promotional video heralds lakeside development, 600 acres of prime lakefront real estate, once home to the old U.S. Steel and Southworks plants on Chicago's southeast side. The old site's new upscale look includes 13,000 single-family homes, 3 high-rises, boat slips, parkland, and schools. Developer McCaffrey Interest, a private company, will get nearly $100 million in public tax money, or TIF funds, to build the massive project. Other beneficiaries of TIF millions include corporate giants Walmart and Whole Foods, opening stores on the south side, but also high-rises in the heart of the high-rent Loop. So what is TIF and how does it work? Cook County Clerk David Orr explains.
If you live in Chicago or suburban Cook County, you probably live near or in a TIF district.
TIFs are used nationwide to spur economic development and job growth in blighted neighborhoods. Here's how. Property taxes collected by the local government are frozen in those districts for the life of the TIF, typically more than 20 years. But the value of the properties rises as development occurs. Tax revenue collected above that frozen rate goes into a large pot known as the TIF fund. In Chicago, 10% of all tax dollars collected in the city, $500 million a year, end up in that pot. Critics call it a slush fund doled out with little oversight by the mayor, and say many TIF-funded projects never deliver the economic benefits they promise. Still, more than 500 TIF districts have been created in Cook County since 1979. Sylvia Ortega lives in one on Chicago's southeast side, next door to the lakeside development. She's lived here for 50 years now.
I still have my same neighbors. You know, I have the Laskowskis on this side, and I have Dolores and Michael Burns on the other side.
Living in a TIF district comes with benefits. Sylvia was able to use those tax dollars to renovate her home, adding a front porch and new windows. Her dad, 2 doors down, got new siding. The neighbor across the street added a front porch too. But Sylvia has concerns that TIF and the new lakeside development will change the face of her neighborhood.
You know, we want to be able to stay here. You know, our taxes have already gone up. I didn't realize how much, but at least by $1,000.
That's where the Alliance of the Southeast comes in.
We really want to make sure that the community that is currently here gets to stay here.
The Alliance is working with McCaffrey to ensure that the old neighbors share in the new economic boom generated by lakeside development.
There's going to be over 100,000 jobs coming through the development, all the way from construction to after it's open, retail and commercial jobs, that we want the folks that are living here in the community to have access to jobs.
So what about those jobs? Are Chicago taxpayers getting what they paid for when it comes to TIFs? We asked TIF educator and civic organizer Tom Tresser. Tom, this is a lot of money. We're talking $500 million a year in tax funds diverted into TIFs. Is this a wise use of public money?
No, I don't think so. If we're talking about economic development for the city of Chicago, I think we have to start with a more fundamental question: is whose vision is driving this ship? What sort of city do you want? What sort of neighborhood do you want? And these TIF deals are clout-driven, like rifle shots. They're mysterious, they're inexplicable, they show up in communities without anyone knowing about them or really being asked. And sometimes the businesses that get TIF money go out of business and leave the community with very little to show. There's no clawback, there's no strings attached to this money. And I think it's a much better way to go is to ask the neighbors the kind of community that they would like. Do they want more teachers, for example? Do they want more parks? Do they want another L-stop or things of that nature that will be around for quite a while? And that's not happening. And so instead, they get TIF-driven projects that benefit only a few people.
Surely when you look at the aggregate and when you look at the web page that the city has with its success stories, you see blighted factories that were turned into shopping malls. You see parkland that was created, affordable housing, job creation according to the website. Isn't this all good for the city?
Well, according to the city's website, yes, of course, it's all good. When you actually do the research, which we have done at the Civic Lab and the TIF Illumination Project, when you look at the literature, you find that the claims for economic development by TIFs, not just in Chicago, but nationwide, are spurious. And the academics that have looked at this data for decades basically say it's a wash to the negative. And that is to say, municipalities that use TIFs actually experience smaller or lower economic development than areas that don't. So it's just a way of moving money around. It's actually a slush fund, frankly, that's controlled by the mayor and a few powerful aldermen. And as we've been to neighborhoods all over the city discussing and disclosing what TIFs are doing, people are not happy, and they reject this top-down, rifle shot, clout-driven project. They would prefer another way.
This seems like an awful big purse here. We're talking about $5.5 billion in the past few decades.
Yeah.
Are there no safeguards here? Who's minding the store?
Well, go down to the city hall and go up to the second floor and knock on the city council doors, and you'll see your 50 councilmen. By the way, about half of those councilmen were originally appointed to their positions by Mayor Daley II. And so I'd say those are creatures of the machine, and they have neither the wit nor the will to enforce the people's will on these clout-driven projects. And so what I was told by someone who knows, that Mayor Daley II told the aldermen that if you want anything physical, and I mean, you know, a new park, a new school addition, things of that nature, you must TIF it. You must have a TIF. And we think it's a net loss to the community. Sure, TIF money can create a small park or a school addition, but it's a net loss to the community. We're looking at figures that's along the lines of for every $10 that are extracted from a community by TIF, maybe $4 comes back for public good.
Now, other cities do use this, but what's so different about what goes on here in Chicago?
Surely you jest. Well, you had one family ruling the city for 50 years, you know, a strong democratic machine for, what, 100 years? So it's one-party rule. And as I say, it's a very unusual system where the sitting mayor gets to appoint an alderman should he or she be indicted, go to jail, you know, of which unfortunately, you know, we had 30 aldermen sent to prison in the last 30 years. So when they had that kind of autocratic centralized control, it's no wonder that it's an opaque, difficult to track, obscure practice. And you're right, it's about $1 billion every 2 years. So in our opinion, this is how the pinstripe patronage machine works in modern Chicago through the TIF program.
Wow, you mentioned $1 billion every few years.
Yeah.
People may listen to this and say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money. I thought the city was broke.
Yeah, that is the common frame, isn't it? Not just for Chicago, but for Illinois and America. And as I can say, as a volunteer organizer and educator, someone who's been knocking around for a couple of decades in the city, I would have to say we're not broke, not by any means. There's $1.7 billion, billion with a B, sitting in the TIF funds at the beginning of 2013. So these are not magic beans. These are property tax dollars, you know, the most basic element of our financial structure. So how can we be broke if there's almost $2 billion in property taxes sitting somewhere in accounts waiting to be used for something.
Now, the city says much of that money is already committed to projects.
Yes, right, exactly so. They said that $1.5 billion is committed. Now, we helped the teachers union file a Freedom of Information Act request on the city asking for an accounting. Please tell us all the projects that should add up to $1.7 billion, or in this case $1.5 billion, and produce the proof. So if you're saying that we're going to build a new Walmart somewhere, where's the contract, or the memo, or the handshake in the elevator, or whatever? Produce those, please, and so we can see. And they basically responded, go take a leap.
Now, to be clear, if not for TIF, much of that money would be going for public education now.
Well, yes, the way it's supposed to work in the city of Chicago, for every dollar that comes from your property tax bill, 54 cents is supposed to go to the Board of Ed, with the rest going to your city of Chicago, county of Cook, libraries, Park District, etc. So all people have to do is look at their tax bill, and they'll know, how they're paying for the operation of our local governments, except if you live in a TIF district, then your tax bill is lying to you.
Now, when Mayor Emanuel came into office, one of his first reform projects was TIF. He put a task force together. They put forward a number of recommendations. What happened after that?
Well, it's gathering dust. I think the mayor realized pretty quickly that this is the golden egg. This is the pot of gold that fuels a lot of discretionary government in the city, and the slush fund that is available to help his friends, as they helped Mayor Daley's friends. So that report is not going anywhere. What we would like to see, very modestly, is simply, if you live in a TIF district, and there's 154 of them in the city of Chicago, 32% of the entire city is in a TIF district. If you live in such a district and your property taxes are going to TIF, put it on the tax bill. If they can collect it, they can report it. And that, by the way, should be the case for the entire state.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there. Tom Tresser, thank you so much for joining us and illuminating us on this topic.
My pleasure.
And now for some other stories trending tonight. Police overtime in question. Red light, yellow light. Will adding 1 second make a difference? And Jesse Jackson Jr.'s treasures are up for grabs. In a surprise move, former White House Chief of Staff Bill Daley bows out of the race for Illinois governor.
What's up with that? Why would he drop out?
Until you get in this as a candidate, you don't understand the enormity of not only the campaign and how different it is. It's one thing to be, quite frankly, in the gallery, and it's another thing to be on the dance floor.
Daley leaves the dance floor only 14 weeks after he announced his candidacy. $100 million in overtime for Chicago police officers. Tax money well spent or not? Police Superintendent McCarthy makes the case.
We wanted to jumpstart that program. Of course, when I described to the mayor where we were going and what we wanted to do, he said, you know what, Gary, I'll find the money, make it happen.
If they are doing overtime, as a resident, it's hard to tell.
Another second could spare you a ticket. One state senator wants to add more time to yellow lights at those intersections where cameras catch your violations.
I don't think that's a good idea, no.
I think either way it would probably be the same. I don't think it would make that huge of a difference, but it couldn't hurt.
Let the bidding begin. Jesse Jackson Jr.'s collection of memorabilia is being auctioned off to help repay the $750,000 in campaign money the former Illinois congressman illegally used.
I don't think that they belong to him. He's been stealing money.
And joining us on our panel this week, co-founder of Apparel Media Group, Amish Tolia, Joan Esposito, partner at J2SC.com, and DNAinfo.com staff reporter, Wendell Hudson. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hey, Chris. Thank you.
So the man with the most famous name in Chicago politics, Wendell, accomplished man. Why would he bow out of the governor's race so quickly? Any thoughts?
Well, here's what I'm hearing from the community. In so many words, a lot of people in the community say they're not surprised because they see Bill Daley as being, quote, a quitter.
That's harsh.
As one resident told me, because they say when you look at his track record, while he certainly is qualified, he certainly has a lot of credentials, he's never really finished anything he started. When he was the Commerce Secretary, he didn't finish out the term. When he was President Obama's Chief of Staff, he left. When he was president of SBC, he left. So when you look at that, a lot of residents say, well, I'm not really surprised that he didn't stay in the race because he never finished anything. Now, why he started it at such a hoopla and then decided to get out, I guess, you know, we'll have to go by what he says. But as far as voters that I've spoken with so far, many of them, they're not surprised.
Joan, one of the cliches in politics is that to be a candidate, you have to have that fire in the belly to be any good. Do you think Daley just didn't have it?
You know, I find it hard to believe that he didn't, you know, he's saying, I didn't really realize what it would be like till I was into it. He's been around politics much of his life, and that explanation doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think over the next few months, something will emerge as to the reason why it happened. But, you know, he knew what he was getting into. He got into it with both feet. He was, I'm in this to stay, and until he's not. So I think there's something else going on.
Hidden story here. Amish,
absolutely.
Could that be just that the polling was so horrible that he knew he didn't stand a chance?
I think what Joan is saying, I mean, clearly he's been around politics for quite some time. He understands how these processes work. Well, I will say, I mean, it's great news for the GOP party. I mean, you know, to be honest, he was going to take, I thought, you know, personally, Pat Quinn for a little bit of a stretch, and you know, a good thing for him. You know, he decided to pull his shoes out of the race when he thought it was time for him to not even go down the path. So, you know, give somebody else an opportunity to jump into the Democratic race. And,
but you know, the thing that's weird is if it was the polling numbers, then you would think the party would say to him, look, you can't win, get out, which has happened, certainly. But then you don't, then when you exit for that reason, you say, well, you know, Quinn really, I've decided Quinn's going to be a great governor. You don't say, this guy isn't going to win.
No,
this guy doesn't have a prayer, but I'm out of here.
Pat Quinn, was that kind of a gratuitous shot? I mean, you're on your way out and you're a Democrat and you tell the public that the sitting governor isn't going to win next year?
Almost like a sour loser is what one person described when I was speaking with them yesterday. And I was with the governor yesterday on the north side, on the west side rather, when he was with Magic Johnson unveiling one of his alternative high schools. And I asked the governor, you know, about Bill Daley dropping out, but yet still having negative remarks to say. And the governor, he was cordial. He said, well, you know what, I respect his opinion. I hope to work with him again. Basically political mumbo-gumbo, if you will. But I can tell the governor looked a little relieved that that's one less candidate that he has to face.
Well, you know, last night Hillary Clinton called Quinn the luckiest man in American politics.
To hit the Guinness Book of World Records.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because he's probably going to be the beneficiary. Let's go to the city desk just for a moment. NBC has reported recently a kind of a shocking price tag for Chicago police overtime. It's on track to reach $100 million this year alone. Amish, is that money well spent, $100 million on overtime?
Look, I think it's a good question. I mean, clearly Chicago's been a focal point on a global basis for the type of violence and crime rates that have been seen throughout, you know, downtown Chicago and through suburbia. And so, frankly, you know, they've got to put some precautionary measures in place. And I think recently I've read that for every 1,000 Chicago residents, they have 4.5 cops in the city that's working on time. And you know, I mean, that's a mind-blowing number to really get your head around that. But you know, I think if those cops are doing their job, they're active, you know, and they're actually, you know, being defensive within and proactive within their sort of areas of coverage, I think it's money well spent. I mean, there has to be some sort of curbing against the violence because you know, it is hitting sort of the global news network, and it's sending a signal to the rest of the world that Chicago's not a safe place.
Joan, there are 400 more police officers working in high crime areas because of this, according to the police superintendent. Does that make it sound like a reasonable
Well, we've got to do something. I mean, clearly what we've been doing hasn't been working. They've got to do something. They've got to try something new, and maybe we can get some of that TIF money. You know,
wouldn't that be good?
Yeah, I mean, just $100 million. Come on,
and it sounds like there's a lot of that TIF money from what we heard
floating
earlier,
around. You know, I cover two of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city for DNAinfo.com, Inglewood and Auburn Gresham, and I spend time every day in those communities. And what the people from those communities talk about the most, next to not having job opportunities, is the lack of police presence that they say that they see. None are complaining about how much money it will cost the city, whether it be overtime, whether it be hiring more officers. They complain more about the lack of presence of police that they see. So as far as those two communities, Inglewood and Auburn Gresham, which are two very challenging communities with high crime rates, they welcome more police. And if it takes more money, so be it.
While we're talking about police and crime and money, there's a state senator in Illinois who wants to change the traffic lights. He says that the yellow lights are too quick. In Chicago, apparently, they're 3 seconds. Some of the suburbs and other cities, they're 4.5 seconds. And he says this is actually going to be a benefit, make things safer. Thoughts on that?
I vote for 10 seconds. I need a little extra time because, you know, sometimes when you see it in the distance and you think, can I make it? Can I not make it? If it were a little bit longer, then I would just go every time. Now I stop, and what fun is that?
And is the justification to save taxpayers, you know, ticket fees? Because, you know, it's just, if you raise the ceiling, it's just going to mean that more people are going to cross through that yellow light, which means more fees, right? More tickets.
But there's a lot of revenue at stake here. I mean, something like $30+ million a year, and there may be a financial reason that Chicago's yellow lights are so quick.
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind, and I didn't learn this until I went to traffic court myself, is that it is illegal.
You're confessing right here on the program.
I'm confessing a long, long time ago when I went through or tried to beat a red light. I found out from a judge that it is illegal to go through the intersection when it's yellow, because that's the main defense that I was using and a lot of other people were using. And the judge said it's illegal to go through the intersection when the light is yellow. So I think if you have more time, people are going to still take that opportunity to try and beat it, but it also raises the risk of, is it going to create more accidents because people think they have an extra second, they're going to hit that pedal, they're going to go through it, and it could potentially cause
Well, the state senator says, he cites a study that's saying adding 1 second to yellow lights in a Georgia town cut tickets by 80% and reduced accidents. What he didn't say is that Georgia town only had 2 stoplights.
Yeah, exactly. This is downtown Chicago. I mean, we're talking about, I think it's going to raise collections, right? People are going to think that they can get right through it.
Raise accidents, because you'll get people like me who think, I got an extra second, let's go for it.
Finally, we've got an auction underway online for Jesse Jackson Jr.'s infamous memorabilia. The feds are trying to get back some of that $750,000 that he was convicted of stealing from his campaign fund. Amish, good way to do it?
You know, the story with Jesse Jackson is one that I think, you know, kind of humors me a little bit. And now it's come to auctioning off 13 of his most, you know, valuable items. I mean, if they're trying to liquidate his assets to the public market, it makes sense. Now, would I go bid on a mink coat? Probably not. So I'm not sure what buyers are out there.
You wouldn't buy me that red cashmere
Joan,
cape
for you.
Joan, does it have your name all over it?
Joan, maybe for you. I don't know. We'll
I don't know. I mean, obviously, the government wants to recoup some of that money. I don't know if we'll see if this public auction, how successful it is.
People think it's a waste of time because they're getting pennies. $750,000 is the money that they potentially could get from this auction so far doesn't look like much. In fact, I think they estimate that if they're lucky, they'll get maybe $20,000. So, and you apply that to $750,000. So it's almost like a waste of time. There are some good items on there. In fact, that mink coat, you know, it sounds like a good Christmas present for my wife.
Well, you know, last I checked, the bidding for that was just shy of $1,000. So it would be a generous gift on your part.
I have to see.
It is holiday season.
And the other items going on, there's a Michael Jackson poster that's already in the $2,000 range.
But you know, seriously, if they're really doing this to raise money and not simply to humiliate Jesse Jackson Jr., wouldn't it have made more sense to go to a respected auction house in Chicago, someplace that could have put the items in a catalog? People could have seen the catalog. They get bidders from all over the United States, sometimes all over the world. I mean, if you really were trying to maximize your dollar, I think you'd have done the auction a little more seriously.
So you think there's a little humiliation involved here?
I don't know. It it doesn't seem like the most effective way to raise the maximum amount of money.
All right, on that note, we have to end. The auction ends next week, by the way, if you still want to buy your wife that gift. Amish Tolya, Jonas Pizzino, and Wendell Hudson, thanks for sharing your thoughts tonight. We appreciate it. A newly established program in Chicago is offering Chicago public school students a leg up on life. The nonprofit Urban Alliance gives students a rare opportunity to experience a world they normally would not get to see.
PR is innovative. You always have to come up with the next best thing. You want to be...
18-year-old Brianna Miller has learned a lot in just 1 year working as an intern at Burson Marsteller Public Relations. Despite her inexperience, Brianna has proven to be a valuable resource to the company.
Often the products and services and companies we represent are going after a teen audience. So we've brought her into brainstorm sessions, and she's provided her point of view to us.
Brianna is one of 71 Chicago public school students enrolled in the Urban Alliance program. Participating local companies pony up $12,000. Half goes to the student intern, the other half to keep the program running. Before starting their one-year internships, students undergo 6 weeks of professional development.
And we go over everything from how to dress professionally, what it means to be on time. Being on time means being early, and what it really means to have a commitment to a job, to be present every day.
The idea is to give young people from struggling communities a shot at a white-collar job.
They have 15,917 followers.
18-year-old Stephen O'Neill landed an internship at the Walgreens downtown office.
I have to present every week because I'm preparing for my PSC slides, which is something that I'm doing with the Urban Alliance program.
The chair of Urban Alliance Chicago is Amy Rule, who's married to Mayor Rahm Emanuel. The program has become a favorite of First Lady Michelle Obama, who recently spoke to students enrolled in the program in Chicago.
I embrace my background, and I want all of you to do that no matter where you go. You do not turn your back on what got you here.
Stephen can relate to what the First Lady said. He grew up in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood.
A lot of kids, they stuck in that same neighborhood, and a lot of people have been stuck in that same neighborhood all their life.
The program really does focus on kids who, in general, would not have a voice. I think that's something to really highlight, and it's something that I'm really proud of.
Working with her Urban Alliance mentors, Brianna got accepted to Trinity College in Connecticut, a big leap from Dunbar Academy and the South Side neighborhood where she grew up. Brianna hopes to be an inspiration to others like her.
So no matter what your background is, no matter what it is that you're experiencing right now, you gotta keep trying.
Stephen says the Urban Alliance has made him realize it's a big world out there, and he wants his 8-month-old son to see it too.
It's really big, and I really want to experience all of it, and I'm gonna make sure my son experiences all of it.
And that does it for us tonight. You are now in the loop. The conversation continues right now on WYCC.org.
To learn more about In the Loop, our stories, our guests, or to view past episodes, check out our website at WYCC.org. I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Until next week, good night.